deal with the fucking human waste that I wade through. I can't sleep. It's fucking killing me, Laura. Oh, fuck you. It's always you. What about us? What about your fucking son? He used to be proud of you, and now I hear him laugh when he tells his friends what you do. He buttoned his shirt, dark blue over white tee, and a protective vest. He checked his service revolver and picked up his keys. Maybe you should think about living somewhere else until you get a grip on your head. You need to see somebody, Frank. I don't know who, but I'm done. He took her words like he attempted to take the world, like it couldn't hurt him if he ignored it. But the stench of the world followed him, and her words rode him rough to the car. A black and white waiting in the driveway, a 454 Chariot of despair. His first call was a 415 which rolled into a domestic violence beef. A couple of tweakers were getting into it over nothing as far as he could tell. A haggard old, maybe young woman crying about some bitch named Crystal who'd taken something and fucked her old man. Jesus. He looked the old man over. Motherfucker had more fingers than teeth. The scars on his face, deep oozing craters, outnumbered the cars on the highway. He was pestilence walking. Frank tried to listen to make sense of their convolution, but his attention was drawn to a small child in dirty clothes. A young boy, too old to be sucking his thumb, standing near the wall, bouncing his head off the plaster. Hey, cop, you listening to me? Yeah, I'm listening. Here's the deal. If you tell me she hit you, she goes with me. But I'm looking at those red marks on her neck, and she says you choked her, so you both go. And the boy, Frank nodded toward the child, he goes to CPS. So what do you want to do? I want him to stop fucking her. Frank pulled out his cuffs. Okay, fuck it. The breath-filled skeleton that had been sport fucking Crystal and choking the girl now grabbed her by the arm. I'm sorry, officer, we'll work it out, okay? Okay then. He replaced his cuffs. Clean up the kid. As the night progressed, things got worse. There was a stabbing near the corner of 6th and Rose. Some border brother had cut some kid up over a few bucks and a bicycle. 2 inches lower and that knife would have broken on a belt buckle, but now he was just another nameless fuck bleeding out in the gutter. As they were loading the boy into the ambulance, his mother appeared. Frank tried to confront her, but when her son died on the gurney, she was beyond consultation. By 3 a.m., Frank had dealt with 2 more assaults, an armed robbery, and a lewd conduct call involving a 47-year-old man and his 8-year-old stepdaughter. At 4 a.m., he was dispatched to a possible 502/PC-148A, a drunk driver resisting arrest. When he rolled on scene, the perp was out of his car arguing with a female officer, Collins. Frank knew her. She was all right, good in a pinch, but in this case, the drunk had what looked to be a few hundred pounds on her, and he wasn't going quietly. Frank parked his cruiser in front of the perp's vehicle, blocking him in, taking the automotive weapon away from the man and in a way disarming the suspect. The drunk was loud, aggressive. Frank jumped from the cruiser and hoisted his baton. A few passerby had stopped to watch. Frank confronted the man. Lie face down on the ground, Frank said. He was firm, no nonsense. The drunk swung his head around, his eyes rolling into focus for a moment before they returned to a toxic blur. He smiled at Frank. I'm gonna need you to fuck off, officer. Officer Collins took a step toward the man. I said lie down, Frank repeated. Now. The drunk staggered toward Frank. Collins advanced on the perp from behind. Lie on the ground, face down. The drunk refused. Officer Collins moved to within striking distance. Within, quick as a night lightning flash, the perp uncoiled and swung violently behind him. A solid hammer fist that caught Collins across the bridge of the nose, breaking it and sending her to the ground. Frank brought his baton down upon the drunk's head, the skull cracking, the blood rising in a vicious wave into the air, and still he did not drop. He stared at Frank, unfazed as the thin torrents of alcohol-laden blood ran down his face. Fucking faggots. The drunk heel stomped the dazed Collins. Frank swung again. The blow grazed the drunk's jaw, no damage done. The perp reached for Frank, both arms extended, a monster imitating horror moves with inebriated precision. Frank stepped back and kicked the man with his steel-toed boot, a hard shot to the groin that finally brought him to his knees. Lay down, Frank screamed. The man refused to comply. He tried to rise. Lay down, face down on the ground. The drunk raised his head as he faced Frank. A movie played within his eyes. A child was raped, a boy murdered, A tidal wave of violence and despair projected from his gaze. He moaned, and the soundtrack to Frank's depression, his failures and futility, echoed harsh into the night. The stench of the world rose like street corner urine on his breath. Frank choked back the stink, swallowed the bile. He alone was vigilant, a man against the tide. Lay down, he repeated. Lay face down on the ground. He could feel the hurt rising from his gut. A man can only take so much. Collins rose and steadied herself. She was going to be all right. She had this. Lay down. The drunk conceded and descended, palms down to the pavement. Laying prone, he inhaled and exhaled in rhythm with the street. Frank was honor and code and order and justice. The perp was an insult to the promise of humanity. For a moment, Frank held, and then, as his mouth filled with the virulence of the world, he unholstered his revolver and dispatched 502/PC-148A, 4 in the back and 1 to the head, before he retched and turned the gun upon himself.
Wow.
That's it. Thank you.